Welcome back. South Africa's economic woes continue. This after rating agency Fitch's decision to affirm South Africa's long-term foreign and local currency debt ratings at WP+, and to also revise the outlook to negative from stable. South Africa's foreign and local currency credit ratings by Fitch remain below investment grade. Government is aware of the strain and risk that the SOEs, particularly Eskom, present to the fiscal framework, it says in a statement, and government is urgently working on stabilising Eskom while developing a broad strategy for its future. Additionally, the government will have to make tough decisions in order to reverse the country's debt trajectory and improve economic growth prospects. To discuss this is Israel Mkhize, who is a Chief Investment Officer at Bukindaba Group. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us, Colin.
Well, things seem not to be looking good for the South African economy, especially where government is trying to intervene in the crisis that the SOEs find themselves in. But then a backlash from ratings agencies. What do you make out of this?
Well, you have to go back to look at the projection in February, where it was said that the budget deficit will be around 4.5%. It could go either way. It could improve by the changing of conditions in the market. It could go west, and it has been projected to go west. Now it's at about 6.8%. Now, if you've got that problem, then number two, as Fitch is saying, pointing out the whole spending on the question of bailouts with Eskom. You look at the numbers of Eskom, the economy as well. Both the Reserve Bank and Treasury have revised down the growth projection of the economy itself from 1.6% to now minus a percent, actually to 0.6%. So those negative numbers are then shrinking, if you will, your revenue capacity, because the target for this year was actually around 1.42 trillion in terms of collection. So if you're going to have a deficit in terms of your budget outlook, you're obviously going to collect less. Then you need to still take from that less collection and have to go to bail out SOEs, in particular this sort of engine SOE, which is Eskom, upon which the whole economy depends. Then you have to go out to the borrowing market, to the financial markets. You go there with an not so good looking balance sheet. So it actually fares quite bad for the economy.
One would have expected that after perhaps a year, even though you can't transform the country's economy overnight, but at least some indicators of where the country's economy could be going. But now, when you look at how things are, the manufacturing sector has not been doing well, the agricultural sector also, and we're having the job bloodbaths. So some of these negative indicators are not showing that there's never going to be any improvement. So where is the country getting it wrong?
Well, there are three things to be specific. One, natural. I mean, the question of drought. You remember, partly the agricultural sector will be affected by the patterns in terms of rain. And then when you come to the manufacturing sector, you'll obviously have to look into the whole, the so-called fourth industrial revolution, where there has to be quite a strong match between jobs, the current skills and the technology that is in demand in the labor market. So if more production is going to be coming out of capital intensive production where machinery is used, obviously the economy is likely to shed labor, as we're seeing the bloodbath in terms of the workforce. But the third one, which is where we really are struggling, is at the interface of politics and economy, because you'd find that Treasury will sit down and do projections in terms of revenue, for instance, and say an economically positive money spinner. Let me touch on a very sensitive elephant in the room and say the e-tolls. Let me make an example. And they say they project and say e-tolls can bring us X billions of rands, you know. So that's the economic rationale. Then comes the political rationale, considering what the people are saying on the ground, what's the mood in Gauteng and all of those things. And then the interest of politics says, no, we're going to alienate the voter, and this might actually offend the middle class, feeling that we are overpaying, we're paying high taxes and also paying a lot in terms of transport. Then you find the Minister of Finance or the Premier of Gauteng saying, look, we're scrapping out the e-tolls. He's making political rationale. Then comes the Minister of Finance and says, because they're talking from calculations and projections, trying to boost up that revenue that I spoke about, the targets of 1.42 trillion. I mean, right now the economy is growing at a negative 68% as projected debt to GDP, which means how much you spend from the GDP that we're making, which is quite shrinking in itself. So it's those two balances. I mean, it's that particular balance. The natural, okay, we cannot avoid that. It affects agriculture. The manufacturing is the fourth industrial revolution, unfortunately, but we can do something about it. But the most toughest, which I think bring about 60% of the problems in the economy, is the interface of politics and economics.
So isn't it a double whammy where the government is trying to take one step forward by trying to fix the fixable, but then you have a problem of the push and pull factors that could lead to political uncertainty, business confidence also going down. So what's going to happen? Because as I said at the beginning, one would have thought that when we are over all this recovery mode and all the Ramaphoria, we could at least be seeing the economy of the country headed towards a positive direction, given that there's going to be massive investment that's expected to be manifesting at the moment.
Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon, because Ramaphosa has more political problems than economic problems. But the spillover effect, it spills over the economy. Let me give you two practical examples which would have featured in his so-called stimulus package. The 100 billion investment drive for the next 5 years, on one hand, and what they have done now in the economic cluster to create the so-called special economic zones, where you want to attract the foreign direct investment to come into the country. Now, you have those two interests. You want to attract this 100 billion over the 5 years, and you want to attract investors in the special economic zones. That's in the economic space. Then on the political space, the investors are saying, but you're not going to go and invest in a country where production or manufacturing can stop for the whole day because there is no money at Eskom, or because there are probably high tariffs in terms of transport. You know, being in Gauteng, you're going to be charged taxis, and you're going to be charged e-tolls, and there might be strikes, you know. So investors look with a different eye when they're looking at the economy. So what has to happen, as I would imagine, I think either at NEDLEC level, or at NEC level, or at government level, there has to be certain compromises where certain political interests or political ideologies, maybe just for 5 years, suspended or frozen, as China did. You know that we say China is led by the Communist Party of China, but when you look at the pragmatics in the economy, it's a capitalist economy. And researchers are saying that China had to leap out of certain important ideologies that they have, which to an extent are kind of like hampering the economy. We're not saying that preferential position for the poor must be abandoned, preferential position for labor must be abandoned. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, when you see that an economic interest which can have a greater good is actually stopped by a small political difference, you know, that's right. That's when really economies take a nosedive.
Mm-hmm. When we're talking about strikes, you know, coincidentally, we've heard a strike this morning in Tshwane where bus drivers are demanding 18%. And last week, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa were demanding 20%. Well, when you look at the kind of demands from labor and eminent industrial action, also, doesn't this speak to negative sentiment when it comes to investors?
Well, the strike environment is a constitutional right of labor. It's enshrined in the Constitution. They can go to strike, they can go to bargaining council, including going to the street. Secondly, our economy is quite a skewed economy, because while we're in middle income country, there is a section that's got a chunk access to capital, and usually that section uses organized labor capital. For instance, if you take insurance companies, if you take government funds, and you see what's going on and coming out on PICs, maybe labor starts to say, wait a minute, we actually have a lot of money. let's start demanding this money and not let this money just be used by fund managers, investment managers. We also want a share in this money. It's the same thing that happened in Marikana. You look at the parity, the earning parity between the guys who actually on the extractive space of the economy and those who are at management. Those who are the extractive are saying, I'm the one who goes under the rock, you know, and I earn about 6,000 rands maybe. I want 12. You know, the guy who's doing cracking the spreadsheet is earning bonuses in million. So obviously the tension between labor and the so-called bourgeoisie, as you know our language in the political economy, starts to come on board. But there has to be a determination to some extent lift up a bit the salaries so that people can also participate.
Okay, just your parting shot.
Right.
Are we ever going to get out of the woods?
We might, depending on the assertiveness of the elected leadership. They have to be assertive because I think President Ramaphosa was democratically elected in his political party, and he was given a mandate by over 10 million people, South Africans. So there's certain decisions that have to be bold and they have to come out. I think South Africans are leading, even the economy needs leadership from him.
Right. Thank you very much for making time.
Thank you so much, sir.
Israel Mkhize is the Chief Investment Officer of Bukindaba Group.